And welcome in to another edition of SEC Football and Beyond. He's Chris Landry. I'm Dan Matthews. And the good news, at least on my end right here, is well, I know not everybody's a huge Astros fan, but I am. So as we record this, the Astros are playing the White Sox. So I'm going to be fully focused on this show, and I think we'll be fine. But the other good news is show this right here a little bit, Chris. Got the microphone right there, and I got a
Yes.
nice little stand for it now, so I don't have
Oh,
to.
look at you. You're not holding the
Yeah,
microphone, folks. It's
not
ladies and
not hold.
gentlemen.
Here we go.
Mike Stand, everybody. Great, great. The man
Next,
has been don't know that the guy has been working with one hand, not behind his back, but one hand in front of his chest holding a mic. That is old time. Hey, even the old time guys used to have like a rope tied behind their neck. You look
mhm.
at some of those old ones.
Oh yeah,
Well,
no,
good
I
for
mean
you, my friend.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So now we've got that free hands to be able to drink water, to be able to talk football with you all. So that's definitely what we look forward to doing here on SEC Football and Beyond. You can find Chris on Twitter, by the way, at Landry Football. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Matthews ATL. It's 1T in Matthews is how you can find me and us there alike. And Chris, we got a lot of games to get into. As I think we're going to do things a little bit differently today with the news and notes. Let's just fold them into the games because there's a lot of different things we can talk about with the games that do involve the news and notes. But I say that before I want to jump in really quick where I know we gave LSU the bug barrels on the earlier show this week. And LSU fans, for the most part, would say, good, they deserve it. I have to get your take about the trolling phone call last night with Coach O, where I'm sure you've heard it by now. Somebody said their sister was in the crowd, and then they said, hey, don't hook up with her. And of course, they ended the phone call right there, where then O proceeds to then say, hey, we got a fishing hole in the bayou I can take you to. Basically, as to, hey, you idiot, I'll show you who's really boss here kind of deal.
That's the
I bring,
Cajun version of
yeah,
Sleep with the Fishes, if for people who don't
yeah.
know. That's what they say in The Godfather,
Yeah,
Luca Brasi
Luca
sleeps with the
Brasi sleeps with
fishes.
the fishes. That's it. Yeah.
Um, yeah, proceed.
Well, I
Your
just, I mean,
thoughts?
I think that it's more than anything. I mean, you've been in administration. I mean, is Ed getting a talking to today of saying, look, even though an idiot calls in, you know that idiots come with this job. Let's not be perceived to be threatening anybody.
The answer would be normally yes. I'm thinking how to answer that. I'm not sure that he is getting to it, and I tell you why. This is far down the road. This is almost, first of all, that comment along with the attitude. I'll just say this. I probably shouldn't, but um, I was there Tuesday night. I live not too far from the coach's office, so I actually had to
Hmm.
go down the street to Walgreens and to get an order filled that they kept saying we're gonna have to do it again if you don't come pick it up. I'm late, and I got a call from one of the hey, come stop by. I stopped by there for ended up being 45 minutes, supposed to be 5 minutes. Um, the cast has died. I mean, this is no longer the speculation about what's going to happen, barring a run of hey, they're going to run the table and win all these games and turn it around. It's just pretty much going to happen. So it's interesting because there could be a comment. Look, hey, I don't know, people can be jerks or whatever, but I don't think there's a whole lot of talking going on between
Mm.
Scott and Ed because Ed knows what's coming. Scott knows what he's going to have to do. And those are not normally what happens is you don't really have a lot of conversations. The
Mm.
whole chummy hanging, you know what I mean? I think we're
Right.
farther down that part. Now, maybe somebody, puts a hand on the shoulder and say, look, don't let him get to you. It's inappropriate to do that. I get it. People not only know that the team is bad, but they also know that kind of Ed is, I think he's I hate to put it this way, I think he knows that he's going to walk away with a lot of money,
Mhm.
and he's not. I think he's past that, and I think it's one of those things where you get tested. You get tested as a coach. I'm telling you, I was an assistant coach. I've got hit in the head with a bottle coming off the field. I've been pushed up against a wall by a crazy fan that's drunk. I know what it's like. Um, it's bad. You could understand losing your coach. Ed is a high energy, high tempered, high strung guy that it's going to be tough for him to hold back on something like that. And quite frankly, probably most people would have wanted to jump up and strangle somebody's neck if they said that. I thought that was inappropriate, even though that's kind of Ed's reputation and what's going on now. But you're right. That's part of the reason why he's not the ideal fit, as I've told you all along, and you know this, you followed it. Knowing Scott, it's not the type of image type of guy that he wants. And it is maybe unfair to say you want somebody who doesn't strike back at somebody like that. Of course you do, but you also want somebody with the poise to be able to deal with that a little bit better, because that's Ed's way of responding, right? I mean, how many guys are
Mhm.
you going to know in front of his team at Ole Miss just rip off the shirt? You want some of this? I'll kick every
Who
one
wants
of
to
y'all
fight me?
ass. Yeah, who wants to fight me? Okay, that's you. I'm not sure that's what you want. And I don't want to make this, pick on Ed. I've been hard on Ed. I've been hard on him as a football coach, and I've known him for a while, and I never felt he was really good head coach material. Lacks polish and the whole, well, he's Louisiana, he talks it. I get it. They won a title, and the national media, I'm already getting this. I cannot believe this. You can't tell me that a coach less than 2 years, and last year was a COVID year, is going to get fired. That's on the outside, Dan, on the outside looking in, that they see last year was a bad year. Well, we can blame that on COVID. And then
Mhm.
this year, it's a bad. Give them another year to fix it. That sounds good on the outside if you don't know what's going on behind the curtain. For people who don't know, Dan is, I don't want to put words, Dan knows. Dan kind of grew up around the program. He's been around a lot of programs in the SEC. So he kind of knows, and he talks to a lot of
Mhm.
people, and he knows the things. I work in football and know things that a lot of what 90% I can't say on the air, but I know things that there are reasons for it. I had the Landry Football Podcast yesterday. My focus was how to evaluate a program versus a team. Dan,
Yeah.
a team can have a bad year.
Mhm.
It's when the program is bad and has a problem. That's what's going on here. So on the outside looking in, you see maybe, boy, not things are not going where they haven't won, but he can fix it. He did it before. Behind the
Right.
curtain, there's every reason to believe that it's not even there's not even a path to fix it by the people that are there. It's a different problem than people think. And I don't think that there's a run in them that's going to have them beat Kentucky and Florida and Ole Miss, come off a bye and beat Alabama, and then beat Arkansas and beat A&M, ULM, yes. I don't see that. Barring anything like that, in fact, I'm told that what if it did happen and then it would be like, oh bleep, what do we do now? I mean, I don't. There's nobody is in there thinking that this is a real possibility. The only real discussion going on right now is there's a final straw, Dan. You always know there's a final straw. It was the
Right.
Auburn game for Les Miles. People have asked me, I was asked this morning, so when does it end? Well, I don't know. I mean, is it out of the question how does it look if they get beat by Kentucky by a wide margin and are embarrassed in a way, and like maybe there's some further signs of like unrest? Could it happen Sunday morning? Yeah, it could. Do I think it's going to happen? I think there's not this plan, but it's probably preferred that they wait to the end of the year. it may be during the bye week, which is right before the Alabama game, to give them a head start. And if they lose the next 3, it justifies. But if they lose and then win 2 or go 2-1, then it's probably, from an optic standpoint, it's wait to the end of the year to basically let him hang himself. That's all that's being quote unquote considered behind the scenes, Dan. And that doesn't sound very optimistic for him saving his job, but that's what it is. The job is basically, it's lost, and he's got to go back and re-get it. Regardless how you want to frame it, that's where we are. Some people are, look, I was on a national show, and a guy says, no. Don't you think his seat is warm, and if he loses to Kentucky, it's hot? No. The seat was warm in August. The seat was warm in December. It's now, there's no longer a seat. The seat has been burnt up. He's got to go find another seat, and he's got to do something to earn the job back. That's where it is. That's just the reality of what's going on. And I'm not going to, I can sit there and tell you what I think is going to happen in these games, you as well, but that's going to dictate the timing. It's a tick, 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 tick. And I think that stuff is starting to, people in the community know it. That caller knew it. Ed knows it. And I think that's why you got that response. It's not excusing it. Shouldn't happen.
Well, and I get all of that, but I think it's also too as well. It's the little things that are adding up. Does that make sense? It's the
Absolutely.
one of your best players isn't eligible for something that perception wise, at least on the outside, because we haven't gotten anything, Chris, that's been a concrete answer on it, but something that possibly could have been prevented by your staff. That's why you have academic support people. That's why you have people who are in position to say, hey, are you going to class? Are you taking care of everything? Are you doing everything? And if not, let's get the support for you that you need in order to be able to accomplish those goals academic wise. The other part of it as well, Chris, and I've seen this before, is the amount of injuries. And I'll go ahead and give credit where credit's due. Josh Pate, 24/7, pointed this out. And I was like, you know what, Josh? I never really thought about that. Is the amount of soft tissue injuries and other injuries that we've seen with this program. Chris, that's strength and conditioning. That is something that your staff that you have in place should be able to gauge. Are we pushing these guys too hard? If we are, we need to back them off. You hear coaches all the time talk about GPS numbers and catapult numbers and all those different types of things that to most people, whoo, right over the head. But they're doing it for a reason, is because they're saying, hey, let's not overload these guys so much to where then during the season they're breaking down. We need them to be ready for the season. We need them on the field. We need them to play. It's football. Injuries happen. I get all that. But the amount of injuries to key players, Chris, it's kind of one of those things that soon enough you got to look at and say, maybe we're not doing things right from a strength and conditioning perspective.
It is, and when you have soft tissue injuries, you look at that. Let me throw something out that's going on over there, and I've said this before. I have to say it because it's an ugly thing to say, but how can I put this? Those injuries that you speak of, if they're having the season like 2019, those guys are not missing time. What's happening is, I don't want to point fingers, really. We're in a, but the reality is a lot of those guys, there's a lack of discipline, a lack of accountability. This season is, it's in the abyss. And guys, the top ones, trust me, they're looking out for themselves. So it's like let me give an example. I'll just tell you straight up. Derek Stingley's injury is serious. Is real. Mm-hmm. It's not that serious. He could play. And if it was 2019, he'd be playing. But the issue is it's going to be a high pick. They're not playing well. He was taking dives in the early part of the season. Just the reality is, he really comes out this week. I'm going to work hard to get back with my team and all that, and maybe he does in a couple of games. The reality is he's setting the stage of here's why I'm not playing. So, A, I'm not going to play. I'm not really committed. I don't really want to be a part of this mess. He had a procedure. It was very cryptic when I checked into it, meaning like was no. It wasn't a crack. It wasn't a. It wasn't. It's a procedure, and I almost got the feeling it's just he's lining up. If they're playing Alabama and they're both unbeaten, he's lining up. He can play. He can move. He can do that. That's what I'm told. That procedure is not like it's a very not surgery. I think they made it seem a little bit because it protects him. It protects his draft stock. And I'm not trying to call him out. I'm just saying that look, they're sensing that the head coach is not in, that the head coach is basically sees the writing on the wall. And I think that's where the players are. I'm not saying they're look, I guess I am saying that there's a form of quitting going on. I think there are a lot of guys that are not quitting, but I do think that. So, I think some of that you'd have to go through it individually in the training room, and that's tough to say. But I'm just telling you, my history, almost 40 years, that training room is a lot busier when you're losing. Not just with it, and boy, when you are winning, they are jumping in and out of there. They're a half an hour earlier for treatment. You got to go hunt their rear ends down for treatment when you're not going well. I'm just telling you, it happens everywhere, most places, except where they're elite and always competing. That's what's going on. And I can't say that it's not some training is I'm not saying that's not I'm just saying this is a big part of the issue as well. That there's a lot going on there, and there as there always is when things start to unravel, and they are starting to unravel. I mean, it is literally that string you pull, and you thinking you're gonna pop it off, and like, oh my goodness, my golf shirt has a big line in it. You just at this point, the best you can do is put a sweater vest over it to cover it up because that's what's going on right now, man. It really is.
I've
It's a
been
shame.
there. I've been there before.
With
There's
the golf vest. I've been
with the
there.
golf shirt.
I've been there.
Yeah.
I've been there with the other thing.
Yeah, I mean
Unfortunately.
it's coffee stains, whatever it might be. The struggle is definitely real when it comes to clothing, that's for sure. But we always appreciate you all listening to us here on SEC football and beyond. Of course, the comment section right here, right there on the Twitch screen. We always love when you jump in there, twitch.tv/Chris Landry football. You can also too find the podcast itself on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcast needs, you can find it right there for SEC football and beyond. Chris, let's get into the games as we have got a 7-game slate schedule this weekend for the SEC. Let's start it off first. A noon kick in the Swamp. Florida after a loss last week. And I think the storyline with Florida, Chris, is really just kind of you touched on this a little bit in our first show this week, and that is the perceived lack of accountability by Dan Mullen. And one thing that was pointed out to me was a question he was asked after the Kentucky loss about his offense sputtering. And he had kind of a smart alecky response of 382 yards total offense. Is that sputtering? Well, Dan, you lose the game. You only scored 13 points. Yeah, I'll go ahead and answer it for you. It's sputtering. They're not going to have a problem with Vanderbilt. That's not the issue here. 39 points is what they are favored by. But I think more than anything is, Chris, as we talk about this game with Vanderbilt, where does that perceived lack of accountability finally come to head for Dan Mullen? Because I got to believe with players, other coaches, it's kind of one of those things that it's, well, if you're not taking accountability, the hell should I?
Uh, well, right now they're hopping mad in Florida, and the fan base is kind of at that point. This guy's never going to get us any better than 8-3. 9-3. 10-2. We're not going to do, yada yada. We're not going to win a championship with it. He's not a championship coach. That's the narrative. I've mentioned before that Dan doesn't like that to the point where he even utilized the opportunity to, get an interview or get the the Jets to interview him this past year to kind of, hey, look, the NFL's interested in him, and you know, there's a big ego thing. Here's what I would say, and I've mentioned this before. One of the things in knowing a lot of these guys, I'm kind of at the age where some of these guys are quite a bit younger than I am, and it used to be that I was coming up with some of these guys. Now they're younger. It's just, look, when you're a head coach, and I did, again, not that cheap plug. I think it's a good listen. Go back to the Landry Football Podcast. That these guys become celebrities, Dan, in their own eyes and in the public. And he is very good at working with quarterbacks and calling plays. But you're responsible for the entire team. And it is almost like their identity, their self-worth, their ego is tied into how the offense looks. And boy, when my offense doesn't look good, the play calling's not good, then, you know, it's almost like it's not that they win, it's how they win. If they win and somebody else on the staff gets credit for it, they're not comfortable. And look, I'm going to just tell you, and I'm not trying to Lane Kiffin, the get your popcorn ready and all, and that's cute and all that, but it's about, well, if I give the ball back to the defense, it's like that's always going to be the case with Lane Kiffin. It's about me and my offense, and I'm tied to that. And so it's how it aesthetically looks is important. And I think it is with Dan. There's something there about him not getting focused in certain games. I'm not there, Dan, but I would imagine they had a crappy week of practice last week. And they may not say it. Why? I just have been around this enough, meaning there was a sense of maybe entitlement. They thought they were really good in that winning loss against Alabama, that was kind of a real positive, that they got this. They got this against Kentucky. We always beat them. How you practice is how you play, your attitude, your effort. And with Dan, didn't we see that against LSU last year? The Kyle Pitts could have played, didn't play. That team was in a malaise early, and they all of a sudden lost it. The shoe and all that, all those things, like, not that he's telling his guys throw the shoe, of course not. But it's just the mindset of when things start to go bad and you don't have a sense of accountability from the head man, it filters down through the staff, it filters down through the players. And it's the only thing that I think that's kind of achieving. And I will say this is applicable to the in-game portion, how he recruits. Part of it is, I'm telling you, it's not that he doesn't want good players. Of course he does. But he wants to win with, quote unquote, because of my coaching, more than like he would love it if he could get there and win the East if he didn't have a top 5 class, because it's more about me. I've seen it happen so many times through my years. It's an ego thing with Dan. And that's why, let's remind folks, when he made those comments about the yards, why was he doing it? Some young reporter, a lady, asked, were you out-coached? That was the thing that you need to go back and listen to, folks.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of that comment, because before you start talking about yards, let me tell you, I told this morning on the show, I thought he had swallowed a peanut. Because, I mean, the lady said, are you being, you know how he kind of stumbles in his little Dan way?
No.
No. Yes. That's exactly. No. He was very flustered and kind of stuck his foot in his mouth with that comment. And so what does this really mean in this game? Nothing. They'll blow out Vanderbilt, probably poor Vanderbilt, a lot of numbers. But, again, as we talked about Monday, how you feeling in Florida, in Gainesville, on October 7th? You're out of the SEC East race for all intents and purposes, not mathematically.
Yeah. Well,
that's, that is not acceptable in Gainesville.
No.
And it is not, should not be. This is not Dan Mullen. You're not good enough. You need to move on. That's what a lot of the fans think. It's Dan. Love you. I said this morning, I know this is a smart-ass comment. I like Dan. I like Dan a lot. Not as much as Dan likes Dan, but I like Dan a lot. And I'm not talking about my buddy Dan Matthews. I'm talking about Dan Mullen, if you're tuning in. He loves them. Or the other one is Dan is good. Just ask him. He'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know, he's just I'm having fun, but I'm like, come on, Dan. Look, you can do better in recruiting. You can do better in some of these matchups. And that's the story more than Florida Vanderbilt this week, I think, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Chris, it's what's doing him in. I mean, it's the fact that he's got good players. He doesn't have great players. And that's one thing, too, is I think if more than anything, it's just kind of to him, it's all right, well, Kirby needs to get all these players because Kirby can't coach as good as me. I'm just using this as an example. Well, Dan, that might be all said and good. I mean, you might think that you're a better coach than them, but you can't coach somebody being 6'3", 290 pounds, and can run a 4.5 40. You can't coach that. So if the other side's got better athletes than you, you might be a better coach, and your better coaching might keep you in the game. But if they are just a notch below you on the coaching side, but their athletes are way above yours, it's not going to go well for you. And that's something that I think soon enough he's going to need to learn is that if nothing else, Chris, I think that every coach has a weakness. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's the ability to fill out your staff to make sure that everything's covered.
You took the words right because if nothing else, then hire a recruiting dynamo or two that they love it. They can't get enough of it.
And Tim Brewster's one of them.
And he is that guy. Yes.
But you've got to do more because you're chasing Georgia. And the whole narrative of, the whole narrative of, well, Georgia gets the 5 stars, but Kirby can't win it, and Dan's back. Dan loves that. He loves that. He's the better coach. That's what he loves. And you know what? I do think there's a humbleness to Kirby that says, I'm a better coach the better players that I get. And it's Nick Saban that says, hey, I'm a
better coach.
I'm a head coach. Yeah, I want to win 17-3. But the rules are not like that, and I'm going to win freaking championships. So we're going to be an explosive offense, and I'm going to put some parameters, put some guidelines. I, as a defensive coach, know what gives me trouble. I'm going to get that. And, not people say, well, he's got the power to do it, and yes, but he's always been that way ever since I've known him. I go there every spring, and I keep saying, I don't know why, just because if it's something in personnel and evaluating, he's looking for an edge. And even if it's something, it's worth it. He's looking for something to get an edge. And if it's anything, so, I go clinic there every year, and I'm not quite sure that he's getting his money worth. I'm just trying to figure out, but he's always looking for an edge. And that to me is a great head coach. And, I think when you step out of I'm a genius play caller to I'm going to be a good head coach, it's no different than Mike Martz in the NFL. How is it aesthetically look? I just think that's a big part of it. I see it a lot, and it's something that I think is a problem.
Well, it's something that hopefully they can get corrected, because if not, we know and we've seen what happens in Gainesville. If you're not winning up to the standard that the administration and the fans think you should be, Chris, then you find your way out. And we've seen it happen in the past. Let's go to Knoxville. Let's go to Tennessee. South Carolina at the Vols this weekend. Tennessee is a 10.5-point favorite in this one. Coming off a really good performance last week against Missouri, a Missouri team, Chris, that's probably not as good as we initially thought, but still a decent enough team that they should have put together a better performance than they did. So credit more to Josh Heupel and his staff for going in there and putting in the performance that they did.
No question about it. And look, based on film study thus far, I think Missouri, even with their issues, every bit as good as South Carolina. I think more of the same. Maybe they do the same thing. Maybe they explode on South Carolina. I do think South Carolina can give a little better defensive look than Missouri, but I like Tennessee in this game, and I think clearly as we're looking at the bottom of the East, not named Vanderbilt, it ain't Tennessee. I mean, I think it's Missouri and South Carolina, which is a little surprising. I wasn't as high on Missouri as some people, but I thought Tennessee would be below Missouri, and I think we saw last week, at least this year, they're not. They're playing pretty good. Offensively, they're very good. Defensively, doing a little better job with limited personnel and limited scholarships. I will say, Josh Heupel, early stage, better than I thought. I think they win this game. I do. I think they win it, and I think they probably cover here.
Oh yeah, 10.5. Like I said, back at Tennessee, and all of a sudden we're looking at the Vols, Chris. That could be a bowl eligible team this year. I think that's something that not a lot of people thought was going to be the case when you
not,
factor in all the player losses
not
and
I.
the coaching turnover and turmoil that was within the program. So if that's the case, that's definitely a huge point in the positive spot for Josh Heupel here to this point. Let's go to speaking of Missouri. They're going to be home, and Eli Drinkwitz needs a win in the worst way. I think he gets it this weekend. A 4:00 kick against North Texas for Mizzou. They are a 19-point favorite in this one. What does Mizzou need in order to be able to get back on track this week, Chris?
Look, I think you got to settle in, got to get the running game going, take control of this game early, kind of play loose, play free. North Texas can't throw the football. They give up a bunch of yards, points. This is a game you should be able to get a bunch of points. I mean, you're probably looking at 45 plus points in this game. So that's what I'm looking for. There's not a whole lot there for North Texas to really try to attack. So this is a get-well game, no doubt. A feel-good game, no doubt. So I think this is one where you kind of let out your frustrations a little bit. Obviously, it's been a little bit tumultuous. I'm sensing now the shakeup of the defensive staff. Well, shakeup with one coach on the defensive staff. Eli's the offensive guy, for those who don't know. He's not happy with the way the defense is playing. And I'm wondering if that could be one and done there in terms of coordinator. But this is an interesting stretch, for Missouri. Not this game, but can they begin to play a little bit better and figure out this defense and get lined up a little bit better? That's going to be key for them going into the offseason to figure out, because, boy, one and done, and if they have to go and get another defensive coach, these guys are learning another system next year. I don't know. I don't know that that's a challenging thing. And so I'm thinking of this game, or the rest of the season for Missouri is, what does this mean for the future? Eli's fine coming back, but who's coming back with him on the staff on the defensive side after 1 year? I don't know. Already one guy's gone.
Yeah, I mean, we always know how it goes too. Whenever there is at least a perceived failure with the program, it's okay. Well, maybe we don't switch the coach, but we got to bring in other coaches because the current group of 10 is just not working right now. So that's interesting. I mean, I think that they expected a lot better defensively than they're getting right now. And that's something that you're right. And who knows? I mean, maybe it could be hey, look, it takes time to put in systems, it takes time to get systems, all those different things. But Chris, normally we see that on the offensive side of the ball. We don't see it defensively. Defensively, usually it's one of those you build over time, but the things that I know we can do well. I mean, I'm looking directly at Wade Phillips. That was just something that Wade was such a guru at, of let me see my personnel, what will work with said personnel, and then we'll get more exotic as the time goes on, and I know that they can handle it. That's what we mostly see because it is definitely a reactive side of the ball. There's no doubt about it. So we'll see what happens over at Mizzou. LSU, we talked about them a little bit as we'll jump to the night slate before we finish up with the final three, Chris, of Georgia at Auburn, Alabama at Texas A&M, and then the noon game, a really good one, a bounce-back game, hopefully, for either of these two teams in Arkansas and Ole Miss. But let's start with the LSU at Kentucky. 16th ranked Kentucky coming off an emotional win. It was definitely a great environment there at Kroger Field last weekend. as now LSU comes in. They need a win. Kentucky is trying to prove that they can piece these things together. I think that kind of the unstoppable force to an immovable object, Chris, here is LSU needs a win in the worst way. We know that. Ed Ogeron knows that. Everybody knows that. But for Kentucky, it's also, can you match that same intensity to be able to pick up a win after such an emotionally charged performance last week?
Yeah, I think in the storyline department, this game, name me a game with more storylines in this league than this one. I mean, you think about it. There's no storyline in Georgia Auburn. We'll get to the game in Alabama A&M. I think Arkansas Ole Miss is who may be the second best team in the West. At least that's how we see it right now. But the storyline is going to be LSU loses in the death watch that we talked about with Ed professionally, of course. It's just getting worse and worse. That builds up, and that's the story there. That'll be the storyline going in, and it'll darn sure be the storyline going out. And then if Kentucky loses, then it's okay. Well, Ed kind of staves off, and can he go on a run? Yada yada. And it's like Kentucky, are you kidding me? You just beat Florida, and you come up with this, and that would be, oh, you can't handle success. You can't handle prosperity. That's going to be the storyline either way. Now, from a football standpoint, what I see is an LSU team that's not very good. They're not offensively. They can't run the football. They play decent on defense. They don't stay committed to the run because what they're trying to do is they went and got guys that are trying to teach this offense that they ran 2 years ago in 2019 without the same players. It doesn't work. And so, they're like, look, the best thing we got is Max Johnson throwing the football, Kayshon Boutte, and that is true. You've got to get him the football. You got to get Besh over the middle. But you got to run the football, for goodness sakes, too. You got to find a way to make that part of it work to where you can run the football. And so they've not been able to figure that out, not been able to do it. You've heard all the stats. They're the third worst in the country running the football. And let me remind you, that's including going up against McNeese and Central Michigan. So we're not talking about a murderer's row of defenses that they played thus far. So, and then on the Kentucky side, I get it. People who follow Kentucky and watch them, they're 5-0. Yay for them. Great. The film room, I come out thinking, man, they're not playing well enough on offense. And for goodness sakes, turning the football over is becoming a real problem. 11? Now, they tightened that up a little bit last week, got a kick return for a touchdown, and Florida got a big play too. And that was the difference. They don't win that game otherwise. And so they're doing the little things. It did the little things against Florida, but they're also doing the little things negatively that can get you beat in a game like this. So fascinating game because you can make a case for either team here, even though Kentucky clearly looks like the better team. And overall, the better coach, better organized team, better future. All those things go on Kentucky's side. But you can see a case where they could let this game get away from them. And at home, that would be an ugly loss. And then it would be an ugly loss for LSU because it's just the next loss and the next nail in the coffin of the head coach.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one. And, the other part of it as well is Bruce Feldman of The Athletic had this today that expect to hear Mark Stoops' name again in the coaching searches. And I think that'd be an interesting one right here, Chris, where if indeed the change is made at LSU, is there a case to be made for Scott Woodard being in the building and saying, I got to see him up close and personal. I like what that guy brings.
Yeah, he's he's an outstanding coach. I champion him wherever he wants to go, and he is the calmer, more genteel of the Stoops boys. He's but I'm going to tell you, he sat there in that interview with Florida State and told them, Florida State was very interested in him. And that interview didn't go well both ways because he pissed them off because he said, because Mark, for people who don't know, Mark was the defensive coordinator at Florida State for Jimbo. So he saw all that, and he saw that fight with the, raising funds, and he said, "What? I got better facilities here."
Yeah.
And he basically challenged them, and he interviewed them, and they didn't really like it. And that's, so they left. Well, we don't want him, or we don't want you. That was, well, I don't want you anyway. I don't want to take you to prom anyway. So whatever type thing. But the reality is, he'd be a good fit in a lot of places. Does he know him? I wonder if he'd want to do something. Look, he's got a lot of involvement in Tennessee. He's a part owner of I'm guessing I know it's a liquor. I think it's a bourbon company. I mean, that doesn't mean he has to stay in Kentucky. I'm just saying he's kind of really liked that. He's comfortable. He's now won more games than Bear Bryant. Than anybody there. And it's kind of like, for those, for those that hadn't been up, Lexington's a beautiful place. If you're into, hey, this is my place, put my signature on it. I always wondered, and we talked a little about it, and he shoved it off. But I often wondered, and I think the answer is no to my question, but often wondered, at least a few years ago, would he go to Iowa? That's his alma mater if Kurt left. But Kurt going to continue a while, and Kurt definitely wants Brian, his son, to get that. I don't know that he will, but, if they continue to play well and Brian's a big part of it, that's more. I think that's less of a thing, but the Stoops all, played at Iowa. So the boys, all three did. So I don't know. I don't know that he would be interested in the high pressure, you better win immediately at LSU. I think there's a comfort level at Kentucky. Although you lose a game like this, you're going to have people say, you see ya. Because I'm telling you what's going to happen. All the Kentucky people, I've seen this before. Didn't we just see this a couple of years ago? You're doing it great. Boy, this guy's great. This is great. And then he's going to lose to Georgia and probably get hammered and say, he can't take him any further than that. As if, my God, what do you want? And I think at some point you might say, look, if this is not appreciated, then maybe I should go somewhere where I can win a national championship, because you can't do that in football at Kentucky. So I think as long as they're comfortable with him being there and doing what he does and how he does it, I think that's a good marriage. But it's a real good thought, and there's some interesting folks that I know that Scott Woodard's gonna consider. It's not a slam dunk for anybody, I can tell you. And Scott's gonna keep it very, very quiet, as he should.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. There's no doubt about that. So again, 7:30 on Saturday night, it's going to be LSU at Kentucky, number 16 Kentucky for this one. Now let's go to a game that's going to be at 3:30. It's going to be part of the CBS doubleheader that is coming up this weekend in the SEC, Chris, and it is on the plains of Auburn. Number 18 Auburn hosting number 2 Georgia Dogs. Huge favorite in this one, 15 and a hook for Georgia. I know that the questions are receiver, who's going to be out there for Georgia? Do we see some players maybe even returning? And then we're already getting the early reports, too, that it's going to be Stetson Bennett on Saturday, at least. And I believe you and Chuck talked about this earlier this week on the Chuck Oliver show, that it's kind of a Saturday morning, get out of bed. JT, how you feeling? And we go from there. So I guess we'll have to figure out on Saturday, JT, how you feeling? Are you able to go? If not, then I guess we see number 13 on the field.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those, they're not going to, they won't say this, but they're not going to push it until they really need to push it. And they would never indicate that. But I think they know that they can navigate their schedule just fine. And the only issue is going to be JT going to be rusty or be sharp enough when they truly need him in the back end of the season. And by back end, I mean conference championship game. I think it's going to be interesting to see. This is the little game within the game, because I expect Georgia to win decisively. I do not like Auburn's offensive matchup against Georgia at all. I mean, I'm not going to waste time trying to sell you on what I think could happen. It would just have to be a take a day off mentally game for Georgia's defense to really allow. But I am curious a little bit. It's not a bad Auburn defense. It's going to be a little bit more of a challenge for Georgia's offense than some of the matchup they face. So I'm curious to see how they play it. I think they're going to do really well, by the way, against it. But in a game within the game, that's kind of what I'm looking for, and that's going to ultimately determine whether they win by 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns, 17. But you know what I mean? It really is. That's the variable in my mind. I don't see Auburn scoring more than, say, 14, 17, 20 points top. And I think Georgia's going to score 30 to 40 to 45. And I don't know. I don't know what it's going to be. So it could be one of those 27 to 10 or, 30 to 14 type games, or, that's just kind of how I'm feeling with it. I think the defense takes over, and that's the difference. And we'll see if Stetson Bennett plays a clean game, whether they can work the receivers. I mean, all those things are going to be interesting to watch in a game within the game.
20 points there. Georgia fans are probably like, the hell, Chris, what happened to our defense? I mean,
yeah, they've only given up 23 all year. So
right.
if they give up 14, 17 points, that's not what they know. And I don't know that they give that. I think that's, again, if Georgia kind of sleepwalks a little bit. Yeah, I expect that it's going to be tough for Auburn to get to 20 points. I mean, nobody else does.
Yeah, we don't do that around here. I think that's kind of the thought of Georgia fans at the moment, and rightfully so, because their defense has been unreal so far this season. Let's go 8 o'clock kick in College Station. Number 1 Alabama at Texas A&M. The Tide, an 18-point favorite in this one. And doing what he does, Chris, we played a cut earlier this week from Nick Saban on the Chuck Oliver show, and he was trying to sell everybody on just how good this A&M team is. 15 players back from last year's team. They were the best in the SEC at the end of the season. All of those different types of things, basically saying, hey, don't think that we're just going to go in there and steamroll these guys, when normally whenever we hear that, we know what happens. Alabama goes in and steamrolls them. But for this one, though, I think that it's just kind of a situation where it just does not look good, Chris, for Jimbo Fisher and his team, with a quarterback who is not playing with 100% confidence right now, a banged-up offensive line, a team that's just banged up across the board against a team who probably came off their best performance of the season last week against Ole Miss.
Yeah, it's a tough watch with A&M, seeing them struggle so much on the offensive line. They've got some youth to begin with to start the season. The injuries have mounted, and they really have no answers. And this is tough. And it brings about, and I don't expect that to change a whole lot. How is this offense going to move the football on Alabama's defense? They're not. They've got about as much of a chance as Auburn does against Georgia's defense, in my view. It's the same thing. Alarmingly, maybe that's a strong word, but too strong. But defensively, Dan, A&M did not play well against Mississippi State. They did not defend the screen game, the crossers. You wonder if the weight of carrying this entire team all year long. Remember, I mean, they couldn't score against Colorado, and I know it was early in the year, and it was the defense that got off the field, and they scored once, and they got out of Dodge with a win over there. And it hadn't been, the defense is continuing at times to play very well, but then give up big plays. So I was asked, is this the best defense that Alabama's played this year? Personnel-wise, it is. Where are they mentally? Where are they emotionally, Mike Elko's defense? I want to take a big picture thing, because our good friend that normally joins us in the chat room, Rock Westfall's been really hard. It's been hard on me and hard on Jimbo. Like, this is unacceptable. You look at Mississippi State, and it's a fair point that a lot of people are making about Jimbo. Is year 4. This is where the program is. And it's one of the reasons why I did the topic of my show yesterday. There's a difference between the program and the team. And I think it's fair to criticize this team this year and them not having answers. Okay, you don't have enough players. You can't get young guys ready to go. You don't have a way to work around. Okay, that's part of what you do. Whether you make $900,000, $9 million, $19 million, whatever a year. But here's how I evaluate teams versus programs. Team, not good. Going to go 0-3 in the SEC. Unacceptable. Is there a pattern? Are there bigger problems? Is it going to happen again next year? Is it going to be up and down? I think it's fair to question whether it will or it won't. But let's see it, because this is a program that last year, with a lot of veteran leadership, I thought they were going to be pretty good. They may be overachieved in some people's eyes. And Jimbo was hailed as the, well, look, man, should have been in the national playoffs. They're better than Notre Dame. Whatever, regardless of where you come on that, they were really good. They were not Alabama good, but they were good last year. They got blown out by Alabama. And they'll get blown out again this year. Probably worse. Depends, again, it's up to Alabama. But I do think we need to halt on making a referendum on who has a great program off of 1 year. I mean, Dan, we do in doing this stuff, I'm amazed in reacting with people. I mean, it is every week. Mike Leach is an idiot last week because they lost to LSU, and now he beat Jimbo Fisher, and he's figured it all out. It doesn't work that way in real life. Let's see. Over time, it will play out. I'm not, we know, again, with a larger sample size of an Ed Orgeron, why it's a problem. So is there a possibility that Jimbo Fisher is not going to get it done to what A&M fans want? Yeah, I would say it's probable, isn't it? I mean, you're going to tell me the chances of beating Nick Saban in Alabama as long as he's there. I know LSU did in 2019. It's the reason why that was a special year, because it normally doesn't happen. I just think that we need to see, and I know, well, he had one since he had Jameis Winston. Yeah, that's kind of how it works. You have good players, you coach them. Every quarterback he's had has gotten better. Zach Calzada may not be the answer. Haynes King might be. The youth of quarterback and the offensive line combination has thwarted their offense. If you can't score points, if you're scoring 18, 19 points a game, you're going to have a hard time being successful. And to me, it's not about Alabama. They're going to get killed by Alabama. But to me, for them, it's about beating Missouri and South Carolina and bye week, then Auburn, Ole Miss. I mean, I think Ole Miss is going to be a tough game for them. Ole Miss will score on you enough, and I don't think A&M is going to maybe score well enough. And then, don't lose at LSU. That's going to be really ugly if you got a coach going on. I get it. But I think there's a difference between 1 year. Let's let this play out for all these. I mean, everybody think that Mel Tucker's got it all figured out at Michigan State, or that Sam Pittman has a better program at Arkansas than at A&M. Does he have a better program, or does he have a better team right now? He's been there 2 years, and it's good luck. And he might have it. But 2 years does not a program make. 1 year is not a program make. One game is not. I just think pump the brakes on all the back and forth, one extreme to the other reaction on who's great, who's not. I think that kind of figures itself out. Let a larger sample size take you to the answer to the question. I think that's the real key. It's how I grew up and learned how to evaluate players, or I was taught how to evaluate players. And it's what I've taken in the coaching search stuff and the coaching evaluating stuff. If you know what to look for, the player, the coach, the scheme, the team will reveal itself. It will grade itself if you know what to look for. It's when you start to have an opinion, which is fine, but when you have an opinion and then try to justify it, that's when I can make anything look great or anything look bad, right, Dan? It's just let it play out a little bit, I think. I'm curious because they're getting frustrated at A&M, and it just does. It's not a good look for Russ Bjork and for Jimbo to get the extension for it. But remember, he didn't get the bump in pay because they thought he was going to bring him a title this year. They're giving him a bump in pay as a preemptive strike to keep him from going to LSU because they knew in the coaching fraternity, in the college football world, what was likely coming down in Baton Rouge, and that is 100% of the reason of why they're doing it or why they did it. And whether it's a good move or a bad move, they didn't want to lose their coach LSU, because in the world of an athletic director or a program, that's a tough thing, right? When you lose your
Mhm.
coach, that says status. Well, there's a lot of pride. I mean, it's almost like we'll pay him and then we'll fire his rear end and pay him off rather than let him go to somebody else. I mean,
Yeah.
when Tommy Tuberville leaves Ole Miss to go to Auburn, that is a shot in the ego boost. I mean, Ross Bjork is an athletic director, leaves Ole Miss to go. It's stepping stone. It hurts. It hurts at Ole Miss to know that, all right, that it's a stepping stone for this guy or that guy. It hurts Mississippi State. It offended them that Dan Mullen would leave to go to Florida, because in their eyes, going to Florida, I don't get that. It's a lateral move. It's not a lateral move. It's a hurtful thing to say. You're not as good, but that's the reality. That's what happened. That's why he got the money, and I think he's getting the heat. Hey, look, give him the heat. He makes money. He all deserve heat right then. But just because you pay him the big money doesn't mean the results are going to come. It may or may not, but time will tell on that. They've got their coach. They're committed to him until they're not. They won't be until he proves otherwise. And this year, it's not enough to jump off the wagon, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be just a bump in the road for them, and see if they're able to bounce back from it in the following years. But definitely not the way that people in College Station saw 2021 going. Final one here this week is a ranked matchup again. It's number 13 Arkansas on the road at number 17 Ole Miss. Rebels are a 5.5 point favorite in this one, Chris. Both teams obviously looking for a huge bounce back win. I personally believe in this one. It is going to be the storyline of the immovable object, that very physical, strong defensive front that Arkansas has, and the physical pace of play that they do have against what Ole Miss wants to do offensively. I think that's going to be the great equalizer in this. And we've seen Arkansas be able to frustrate some teams so far this season, Chris, and win some games that we did not expect them to win.
Yes, and it'd be interesting to see. Now, it's a 3-game stretch of physical games that Arkansas has to. Well, they're coming off 2 physical games. I'm wondering if that could have an effect. I don't know. It's a rhetorical question. We won't know till we see it, but it's early in the season. But even the physical big hogs had 2 big matchups. It's going to be quite interesting. Remember, Ole Miss had the bye before Alabama. It is speed against Braun. I'm very curious how last year this was a great coaching clinic. Barry Odom forced Matt Corral into pretty much every interception he threw all last year was in that game. And it was the 2 deep look and threw the football in the tight windows, and it was a mess. Ole Miss wants to run. They want to run with tempo, or they're going to want to try to run Arkansas out of it, try to get them gashed because they can't move them. They try to block in layers. They're going to have a little similar game plan. I know it didn't work, but they're going to want to try to do some of the similar things that they tried to do against Alabama, and I'm curious to see how much more effective it can be and whether it's a little bit more speed. And then the other part of it is, Arkansas's physical on offense. They can run the football. I think this Ole Miss defense is still a big question mark. I don't know. I've gone back and forth. I thought early in the week, immediately my immediate thought was Ole Miss. I like Ole Miss's speed here. Is the more and more I look at it, I don't know. I don't know. I could see Arkansas pounding the football and controlling it there. I think it's the most intriguing matchup in the conference all week. I mean, we talked LSU-Kentucky storyline, but this game is the most intriguing strategic matchup of the 2 for me.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. And you got a really good noon slate, too, of games this week. But it's 2 programs that really want to bounce back, because I think with programs like this, Chris, is you lose 2 games in a row. I wouldn't say unraveling, because I don't see that being the case at either of these schools. But it's still one of those where you go from the emotional highs of some huge wins this year to the lows of crap, we've lost 2 in a row. How do we get this thing back on track? And kind of restarting that process again. Does that make sense? I think that that's
Absolutely.
something that both coaches want to make sure that it's okay, we played a tough team last week. We lost. It happens. Don't worry about it. That's the football season. And for those reasons, too, I think that, you know, looking at Arkansas, I think that less pressure is on them this week because they weren't supposed to beat Texas. Some people thought they could, but not necessarily that they would. And then A&M, they weren't supposed to beat A&M. They did. They were probably supposed to go to Athens and have the result they did against Georgia. So I think if nothing else, Sam Pittman
Yeah.
can look to his guys and say, "Guys, flush last week. That was it was a tough one. We're not as good as they are. That's
Right.
fine. That happens. We can deal with that. But we can beat these guys." And I think that
I,
that's kind of the mentality that Arkansas goes in there with. I think if you're looking for a game to have an upset pull off this week, I would bet Arkansas over Ole Miss.
and you know what? You bring up something that's interesting, and I think that's going to be a media storyline that, and I hadn't really thought of it in that terms, but that's a really good point. So if Ole Miss loses, if Arkansas wins, then the narrative is you hadn't beaten a good team yet, Ole Miss. You played Alabama, you get beat. You played Arkansas, and you beat Louisville, Tulane, fine, Austin P. And
Right.
all of a sudden, how about this? Tennessee scores 60 points against South Carolina or 50 points. All of a sudden, something we never thought they're going to say, how about that game, Lane in Tennessee, and, no defense and all offense. All of a sudden, we think that's going to be we'll get to that next week. That's going to be, hey, this is a much watch. Neither team's going anywhere, but they're going to be really exciting. And, the storyline's there, but all of a sudden, I would not have given a prayer of a chance of Tennessee against Ole Miss going into the season. And I still think Ole Miss will win that game, but that's for next week. I think that's a really good point. Ole Miss at least needs to show that they can beat a good team because to this point they haven't, because they played some relatively easy teams and they played one great one. No one expects them to beat Alabama. Well, some people thought they'd beat Alabama. Most people didn't. But now you lose to Arkansas, then that becomes hey, man, look at Arkansas again. And it boosts up Arkansas because, again, the only thing Arkansas, did is where they couldn't beat Georgia. Well, big flip. No, they're not going to beat them. So I think that's a really good point. Really good point by you.
All right, a couple of quick mailbag questions here, Chris, to close us out to end the week. Rich Coates, wanting to know, could you see a situation where if LSU were to lose badly to Kentucky, Florida, and Ole Miss, they finally decide to move on from Ogeron and let an interim coach finish the rest of the season? And the second part that I'm going to kind of add to this, Chris, is who would be the candidates for interim status if indeed they decide to go that way?
Rich, and yeah, we'll definitely address it. You may have, I'm guessing since you had that, you missed the first part of the show. Go back and check that out, kind of at the maybe 2-minute mark or so. We went into we don't have time to go to another 15, I think we went 10, 15 minutes on it, of all the scenarios with that. So maybe you want to check that back. But yes, in fact, I think it's kind of a clock ticking thing. If they were to lose in an embarrassing way to Kentucky and it looks like things are completely disheveled, it's not out of the question that he loses his job Sunday morning. I don't think that's going to happen. But to your point, yeah, if they lose to Kentucky, Florida, and Ole Miss, then they got the bye week before Alabama. I don't think it is a possibility. I think it's a probability that they will let him go and then begin to kind of take care of the parting of the ways with him and then kind of have the freedom to not go behind his back, to maybe make some contacts with certain people and, which you've got limitations there anyway. So I think that's the case. If it were me, here's my thoughts on an interim coach. it's tough. Most people say you promote a coordinator. Well, you don't have anybody in the offensive side to do it, and you really don't want Durante doing it because what you do is you hamstrung and you make it more pressurized for the coordinator to do it. I'm not so sure that in that stage that I wouldn't give it to Steve Ensminger, who's never done it, and say, "Here's a would you do that?" Now, Steve is probably not going to want to do that, but I think you could talk. You could talk to somebody. You could talk, something like that. I think, though, unless things completely fall apart and it becomes like embarrassing, I think the odds are that Ed finishes the season and they just avoid doing any of that so that they can say they gave him the full season. Because I think that Scott has got the narrative of he's a big PR guy. So if it's going to look like they didn't even give him the entire year. 2 years ago, they won the title. Last year was COVID, and they're firing him midseason. I don't think Scott wants to do that unless it becomes like untenable, meaning like it becomes like he completely falls off the wagon. And I don't mean that like, where he begins to embarrass beyond just bad football, then I think you would see it, and you would likely see it prior to the would do after the what is it, the Ole Miss game is the last game, so it'd be like maybe the 24th, which is the 23rd is the Ole Miss game. That gives them the bye week. So that's where I think it would happen if it's going to happen during the season. But again, with the clock ticking, it could happen anytime depending upon the circumstances that would make it the final straw, is the way I put it in the conversation early in the show. Check that out if you missed it. I think you'll like Dan and I's thoughts on that.
One final one, just really quick. It's more of a statement that I'm going to turn into a question, Chris. And that's MSB_Tiger. I think the primary issue in the Kentucky game for Florida was the penalties, similar to last year. Player throwing the shoe against LSU, it seems, have trouble with player discipline there at Florida. Is that something like I talked about too, just to kind of revisit it and just kind of circle back to it a little bit? The perception of lack of accountability. Is it one of those where if it's not intentional, it's kind of one of those where I don't know if through osmosis is the right way to put it, Chris, of, well, the coach is this way, why can't I be this way?
Yeah, and it's exactly, and I think MSB Tiger is right, but we kind of discussed that. That's what I'm saying is there are different ways to make mistakes. There are penalties, there's sloppy play, there are misassignments, there's all of that is a lack of focus. All of that is a lack of discipline. Lack of discipline is not just, well, he punched a guy after the play, or lack of discipline is throwing a shoe, or, that's a lack of discipline, but it doesn't have to be to that extreme. A lack of discipline is just, lack of accountability, which is Dan is talking about. Those are the type of things that you're not as sharp focusing your attention to detail on things. And you can't be we're going to be a really sharp, disciplined, focused team sometimes. You can't do that and live and be great and do that. This is why somebody like Saban is such a stickler and such a pain in the rear to his players. It's because focus on doing it right. We're up 45-3, but you play every play like it's got a life of its own, because it's like anything else. Rich, MSB Tiger, Dan, all of you guys are listening. You know how it is. Some of you might be in sales. I don't know. I mentioned this. So you made your quota for the quarter. Well, I can play a little more golf now. It's okay. There are different ways to run your business and do your job. But the point is, in football, if you take that attitude, you lose focus, and then all of a sudden the game becomes different and tougher, and maybe you get upset. There is no doubt. Love what Kentucky did. Kentucky didn't even play its best game. They were sloppy. They made mistakes. Florida made more. Were sloppier with more talent. That is what rankles the folks. Look, the Florida fans will tell you, we're not happy with that close game against Alabama. We expect to win. The reality is, that teased them to think we're on the cusp. Look out, Georgia. We were close to Alabama. We can come and beat. Losing to Kentucky is an ego blow. They know that shouldn't happen in their eyes. And you know what? That is exactly what happens if you don't take care of your business. And that's why you can't just, well, we're going to take care of our business sometimes. We're going to take care of business in some games. Well, that's why you don't focus on the result, because you can still blow out a team. You can still beat a team even if you're better and you have more talent. That's why when we grade tape, we grade every player on every play: assignment, effort, technique, and execution. Your assignment could be bad. Your effort could be bad. Your technique could be bad. But the execution may not be all that bad. And then the fifth thing is the result. Well, the result, if you're an offensive lineman and you get good result and block the guy, you will have the result. But if the assignment, effort, technique, and execution is not good, it's a negative grade, because the next time you do it against a good opponent, it's not going to have the same result. Don't coach the result. Don't teach the result. Teach the assignment, effort, technique, execution. That's going to create the result. So that's one of the things that I think that Dan has certainly was lacking against Kentucky, with all due credit to them.
You say it all the time. Either you're coaching it or you're allowing it to happen. So,
yes, sir.
To your point, that's exactly it. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of SEC Football and Beyond. Of course, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast needs. Follow him on Twitter. He is at Landry Football. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Matthews ATL, 1T and Matthews. I want to thank everybody who participated on the Twitch comments section. You can hit us up on Twitter. You can hit us up there. Twitch.tv/Chris Landry Football. Enjoy the weekend of football, everybody. Let's catch back up early next week, as this has been another edition of SEC Football and Beyond.